Well, I know our two commissioners are just outside the hall, so, but it is 11.
I was technically here if I was doing the minutes. Janet Long caught me in the hallway, so I was here.
No personal comments are allowed at public comment. Since it is 11, let's call this meeting to order. This is the Executive Committee of the PSTA, and today is November 2nd. Do we have any public comment? Seeing and hearing none, we will go to action items. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion on the minutes?
Move approval. Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Next item is board rules and regulations. I think we need to recognize... I'm sorry. The next action item is the meeting schedule. And it is attached. Are there any questions, comments on it?
What professional font?
I guess I do note that we have these are the executive committee, right? So is there a motion to adopt the proposed meeting schedule?
So moved.
Second.
Comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Now we go to board rules and regulations. Mr. Miller, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. So this is an action item for the committee to recommend essentially 4 changes to our rules and regulations that are mostly related to your discussion a couple executive committee meetings ago, trying to make the board meetings run more efficiently. So on page 6 of your packet is a summary of the 4 changes, and then the red line, the underlined and strikeout version follows that. The first change is that, just clarifying that public comments have to be related to PSTA, which our rules didn't say before. The second comment was one that you asked for, where board members' comments related to public comments must be addressed to either the chair or to the CEO, not to the commenter. The third change is a little bit different. This is just clarifying the rules and regulations based on a change we made previously to expand the executive committee to 5. The personnel committee will also remain at 5. And so this just clarifies what the personnel committee is made up, which is the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, plus 2 other board members. And last but not least, something you asked for that states that PSTA follows the Roberts Rules of Order. And then there's a nicely produced reference guide there on page 11 of your packet.
Are there any questions on the proposed changes to the rules?
I have a question. Do we need to specify, is there any particular version of Robert's Rules of Orders? I mean, I've seen big books, I've seen handy guides. I would presume that there's not a whole lot of conflict between the different versions, but would it make it easier if we specified a specific publication?
Was the newest edition, because they do update the editions every couple of years, and so I thought to try to avoid having to go back and update the rules every time they updated
Okay.
the book, so I just said the newest edition, whatever that is, they're on the 11th. I think it's the last edition.
Okay. It's good enough for me.
The question, the board officers, that's the 3 elected officers, not the past chair.
Right.
Right.
All right. Are there questions on the quick reference guide?
Just got a couple of points, they're not really questions.
Okay.
On the Robert's Rules, I was trying to find it quickly, but I think the county's adopted them as guidelines, not that we have to do that, but that way you don't get into these technical debates about, it should have been a table versus whatever. And I just kind of see us, if we say, we're adopted and shall govern all meetings,
Using it as a guide.
yeah, I'm just kind of thinking on the fly here, maybe if we say if we're using it as a general guideline,
We do that,
that might be a little bit more flexible.
and that does help, although we follow it pretty strictly,
Yeah.
but we do that for that very reason.
Okay,
But you call it a guide.
Yeah.
I can change that.
yeah, if everybody,
I think that might be helpful,
Yeah.
because when you're in a meeting and you are flowing and maybe somebody technically uses the wrong
Yeah.
word, but you are actually moving along as the
Everybody knows what
board's
we mean.
process, it would be, I've gotten some correspondence, as some of you know, from our private parliamentarian, Mr. Rask, who was picking on some of the wording. And clearly, Robert's rules are designed to facilitate the board's process, not to impede the board's process. So I concur with that.
the other thing is on the, any questions or comments of board members in response to public comment shall be directed at the chair or CEO. I agree with that, but on the front end, sometimes we get folks that are public commenters who specifically speak to a specific board member, so. And sometimes, Mr. Rask, for example.
Right, this last meeting,
Right, he's done that several times.
He likes some of us better than
Yeah. Well, he's
He
got
did.
an issue that he's copied the chair and commissioners,
Yeah.
blah, 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 about me using my personal email, which is totally bogus, but if you were to come to a meeting and say something about that, I would want to be able to respond on the record to that, and this is saying, I can respond, I just need to respond to the chair. We're not saying a board member cannot respond to something that's said in a public meeting.
right.
Okay.
No, the idea was not to stop the
Back and forth.
back and forth question and answer that gets, that some board
Okay.
members have gotten into as members of the public at the dais, and so the 3-minute discussion ends up being 10, 15 minutes of back and forth with board members.
Okay, as long as the board member can respond for the record, that's my main concern.
And it does, I just also wanted to just point out, the rules already do say that all remarks of the members of the public must be addressed to the board as a whole and not to any specific member.
Yeah.
I
know what it
understand
says.
there's people who ignore that,
Well,
and even when the chair has said things, there's people who ignore it.
Yeah. So those are the only two I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr.?
Well, I was just going to say too, it also says in the rules, any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, blah, blah, blah. I would think that in regards to your emails, that would be more personal than having to do with PSDA.
Yeah.
So it really is kind of up to the chair to put a stop to it. They have
Have
to.
to consider the source, though. Somehow they'll try to tie it in,
Yeah.
say it's, public issue.
Well, our attorney has mentioned that if you do receive a comment or an email relative to the city of Clearwater or PSDA on my home computer, their recommendation is you forward it to the public computer so it becomes part of the record. So, and that there was a case actually declared relative to the city of Clearwater that a personal email on the city's computer is exempt from
Not a public record.
yeah. So
A personal email, even if you use your government-issued computer, is still not a public record.
Wow, that is the first time I have ever heard that.
Really?
Yes, because I have personal experience that contradicts that in terms of what the attorneys were looking for. I was working in state government at the time, but
Well, there was a case with the city of Clearwater where the Tampa Bay Times sued the city seeking emails of two of its employees that they made a public records request for that involved their personal business, and it went to the Florida Supreme Court. The Florida Supreme Court said those were not public records.
oh, good to know that, because this was a long time ago.
Yes, this is probably more recent.
Wow, good to know.
I do have one question on the quick guide,
Mm-hmm.
and that's on the voting. It says all votes shall be by voice.
Where are you?
I'm on page 12.
The back of the page.
Oh.
Yeah, the back side of that. And right in the middle of that last paragraph. And by saying shall be, but if we have a split vote and we don't know where it is, we have to have.
Yeah, I probably should clarify that. All votes are by voice unless, I mean, the chair has the authority to call for a roll call vote. So let me change the language there.
Yeah, because
Or a show of hands.
on some issues, it is important to reflect, yeah.
Especially when we have 8-7 votes.
Yeah.
We never do that. Okay. Is there, with those two amendments, is there a recommendation to the board on these things?
So moved. Second.
Okay, and is that, it's for it to be on the consent agenda, or do you think this needs to be as an action item?
I think it could be discussed. I mean, it's a recommendation from our attorney. It's not like we sat here and made it all up.
This is for December. We're not meeting.
Yeah, for the December.
December. I think it's not get moved if you have it on consent, but,
I think it was just.
Yeah.
You do?
yeah.
So then let's
Yeah.
put it on a regular action. Is that-
I'm saying it
can
should
that
be.
in the,
Yeah.
okay, so.
Well, I think, well, why don't we just, let whoever wants to remove it. It's the recommendation of us as a whole to put it on consent.
Whatever you
I was
guys-
thinking
whatever
it
you
would,
guys wanna do.
if we gave a report, it would just be an opportunity to make sure that board members heard what we discussed, a summary of it, because it has to do with how we run the meetings.
I'm open to whatever you guys want to do.
I think particularly for, if it was January, we'd have a couple new members there. Can we do this in January?
We could do it. There's no reason.
I mean, that way you've got all the new members and they know how we want to proceed with meetings and handle
And the
the public
chair will
comments.
be in place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it in January. We don't have to worry about it. Oh,
So is the motion to recommend this as amended to the board in January as part of an action agenda?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Are
if
there-
you want to make any comments to any citizen in the December before this goes into effect.
That might work out.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, could I
Yes.
ask a question, please? Since I left from the very beginning to we approved the minutes of September already?
Right. And the
I had a question
meeting
about-
schedule.
I
Oh,
have a
you have a
question
question on the minutes?
about the minutes.
Okay.
On the first page, on page 3, we had a nice conversation about the organizational structure of PSTA, and I just wanted some input from Brad as to whether or not any movement is taking place on that.
Are you talking about the number 2?
Yes. Is that appropriate to ask that question at this time?
You're not questioning the way the minutes were written, but you're asking
No.
status on
I
it.
had started as an
Yeah.
opportunity to have the status report since we were pretty,
Well, you can, sure, you can answer it. We're pretty flexible in the small group. We will be reviewing the outstanding action items a little later in this meeting, right? The follow-ups,
where did
Yeah.
it say that?
4D. It just says it from the board meeting, but can we include it there?
I don't care, whatever you want.
Okay.
I just would like to know the answer.
Yeah. Okay, next agenda item is the December board meeting agenda. And that's in the back, page 13.
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, see on page 13 the draft agenda. I appreciate the deferring of the rules and regulations to the January meeting, because I think this is going to be a relatively long meeting again, or it could pan out to be a long meeting. I think 11:30 is incredibly optimistic, given the items on the agenda. Of course, after we go through the officers and the committee appointments from the nominating committee, we've got 3, I think, important sort of planning, they come from the planning committee, actions to approve. First is the East Lake pilot program. Well, maybe by the time this comes to the agenda, it may not be East Lake, but the transportation alternative program that the planning committee saw at its last meeting, and then we'll see again at this meeting to make a recommendation to the board.
Is that on here? Am I looking at the wrong thing?
Yeah, 5B.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So we have the consent agenda items, which we no longer have the rules and regulations on there, because that'll be pushed to January. And now I'm moving on to the action items. So we've got the board officer and committee appointment recommendations that the nominating committee just made last week. Number 2 is the pilot, the transportation alternatives, i.e. taxi cab and Uber proposal. To recommend, the planning committee will have on their agenda this month to recommend to December 9th. I think that will have some discussion.
I had suggested 25 minutes. I thought 15 was too short.
I would agree with that.
I just put that down for now. Any objection to that?
Which one are you suggesting that?
5B.
Oh, that's, okay.
And then on the next page, I've actually said 30 minutes for each of those.
That may be more realistic.
Question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So the Central Avenue BRT, is there anything new on that, or is it just a review?
It's an action item. I think it's, the action will be to officially approve of PSTA entering into the federally designated phase called project development. As Commissioner Long and Rice know from our trip to Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago, the FTA has a whole process that they want to go through, and it's very important that we follow a prescripted timeline or a process in order to assure ourselves of the necessary, that we can be competitive for the federal funds we need to implement the project. What those folks in Washington really want is for us to designate that we have a project that we're committed to, and that we are in this phase called project development. That is it's a very positive step, because then once you're in the project development stage, then any expenses that you have for design or any expenses can be billed essentially to the project and count as your match toward those federal funds. So I think it would be good, Senator, you can chime in if you want, but I think it would be important for PSEA at the December meeting to officially approve the project to enter project development. The parallel action item that I think is important for us, I think we can take it at this December meeting, and that the City Council of St. Petersburg take, is also approving the project and the ability to designate a lane on First Avenue North and South as available for this bus rapid transit program. Doesn't need to fully dedicate a lane, but it does need to dedicate a lane on First Avenue North and South to the BRT line during peak periods. And that has been discussed, I know, with me, I've discussed it with
That's always been a part of the plan, right?
Mhm.
So
It
I
has.
know.
And at least my discussions have been positive with the council members I've talked to.
How much, Cassandra, did you say we have already set aside?
$4 million.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So, for this agenda item, Brad, you may remember that there was a lot of discussion about that project list that we brought. It was a very nicely laid out graphic, and it had all the different deadlines to enable this project to come to fruition. And we found out in our discussions that there were a couple of places, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but from recollection of it was at the bottom of the list, where the deadlines were switched.
Yeah.
And so, after we left that day and we had our little debriefing meeting that night, we talked about how important it would be to redo that sheet to accurately reflect the deadlines that they needed to be, number
Right.
one. And number two, I think that having that sheet redone to reflect the actual deadlines and the fact that we're taking this action should also be part of our messaging when we are in Tallahassee with regard to the steps that we've taken from last year till now to line us up properly so that everybody's clicking along on the same path, and they're not thinking one thing and we're going off in another place, and then all of a sudden you get a big surprise because, oh wow, this piece hasn't been addressed. So if we can tell the state, here's what we've done to line us up with the feds, now you have to come with your stuff behind it, I think we'll have a stronger message.
That's exactly what we're attempting
And
to do.
so my point in this big, long, revisit of our meeting is to not lose sight of the fact that those deadlines are really critical, and it was only in that meeting that I became aware of the things that we needed to be doing along the way to make sure that this happens, and I think that that would be a valuable thing for the rest of the board to know. Or do you think that that's just too much micromanaging information? I don't know.
I think that should be in front of
But I
us at
think
all times.
we all should be working towards the same end, but if some of us are aware of those deadlines and other people aren't, then we're kind of pushing uphill to get the whole board along.
Yeah. Is there any disagreement with Commissioner Long's suggestion? I think you have some guidance in the executive.
And just to a real quick add-on. One of the takeaways too is that the FTA definitely wants to see that we're dotting our i's and crossing our t's as far as public engagement goes. So PSTA's resolution or action that we take is important, and also very important for St. Pete City Council. And that is something that goes like in our file at the top of the list, and they want to see that we totally understand how the application process works, and they want to make sure that we are totally on top of public engagement. They don't want to get surprised on down the road as they commit money and then find out that there's some sort of, we hit a bump in the road because...
Yeah.
And it surprised me to learn that if we miss one piece of that, there's no mea culpa. We have to start all over again. It just completely eliminates them. So those things are really critical. That's what I heard.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. We talked about this was part of Green Light, and, so many things got caught up in that Green Light conversation, which of course was dominated by Rio. But there was, as part of the no tax folks, Dr. McKayla in particular was making an issue of losing a lane on First Avenue, which has happened before, but those lanes aren't always there. And so the question is, what have we done in terms of public engagement from the city side or from PSTA to let folks know how that is actually going to work? It's on the left-hand side, right?
I'm not even sure if we've
So I'm
decided
just-
left or right hand.
So that hasn't been,
We still need to do that process.
okay. So I just didn't want us to get ahead of the city, with this agenda item. Do you see that coming up in terms of the city engaging folks on the First Avenue?
We've been talking to city staff for quite some time about this, sort of mentally preparing them for the ask and discussing the project. They understand that in order to make this project work, we do need a dedicated lane as part of the BRT package to be eligible for the grant program in lieu of other technology elements in the project. They have done a traffic analysis of the First Avenue, and the issue there is right turns. And so as long as you maintain the ability to have a right turn, you can use the right turn lane as a dedicated road.
Use the right lane.
You can make a right turn by using the bus lane.
Using the bus, yes. And then it simply becomes an enforcement issue.
First Avenue South is eastbound, right?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So I thought I heard Jeff Danner saying it was a left exit on the buses.
City staff has changed over. There's been a big discussion about what that project would look like. There, for a long time, at least 3 years ago, or more, there was discussion about the project had to be on the left lane. That was simply because for pedestrian proximity to Central Avenue. That was not based on the operations of the bus and the engineering feasibility of the project. That was a preference, a pedestrian preference of the city staff at that time. City staff is different now.
Right.
Although I would still characterize that decision as not been made yet. Jeff
Yes.
Danner is still out there. Jeff and others along Central Avenue are still advocating on behalf of a left-hand, put all the stations right on the left-hand side, so they're closer to Central Avenue. And
So it's to be determined.
I would say to be determined, but I appreciate Cassandra's effort to try to get that decision made.
Would part of the PD&E's process be to look at the right lane versus left lane?
Yeah, I think that, yes. There are pros and cons to both. One of the real challenges, of course, is if we have other bus routes that run on First Avenue North and South. All of the buses in our fleet today have doors only on the right-hand side. They have to go on the right-hand side of the road. So if you're standing there and you want to just get out, go west, say, you'll take the first bus that comes, and you see the BRT whiz by on the other side of the road, BRT and you see another bus go by. So,
I-
it needs to be reviewed further. But,
Any-
all the more reason, so I think, I hear consensus that this is an important item to put on the agenda.
30 minutes reasonable?
It's optimistic, but
Well, we had, I'm just trying to get down to the bottom. We're right now at 12:05. Of course, we never know how much time public comment is going to take, although we've allowed 15 minutes for it.
Which is optimistic.
Can I just weigh in on this a little bit?
Sure.
I think that when we know we're going to have a long agenda and there's a potential for a lot of discussion, that the board should be notified to come prepared to have a lunch break, ESCA, and we'll resume after 30 minutes. To keep us sitting there till 1:30, 1:45 in the afternoon before we break is just unreasonable, I think. If you're asking us as a board, which the public expects us to do, to be operating with all of our cylinders working. When your blood sugar dips to the point where you're becoming really cranky and not quite so nice, it's just
that
hard.
never happens.
If I miss
But
my,
get cranky or low blood sugar?
well, we break on the county commission,
Sure.
and I can't even imagine how we'd function with the issues we're dealing with if we didn't do that.
You don't walk around and cranky.
There you go. So,
So you're suggesting we would break at noon or at 12:30?
or 11:30, or just to give people a break and an opportunity to, not miss anything and get up and go to the ladies' room and get a bite
Well,
to eat.
Noon or chair's discretion.
I have
Yeah.
tried to do depending on the schedule, take a 5-minute break at 11 o'clock. That's 2 hours.
That's what we do, Dunedin, every 2 hours, we just take a 5 or 10-minute break and
But
kind of.
we don't have lunchtime
Yeah.
interfering with that. I mean, if it's going to be long,
I think 1:30, 1:45 is long.
I totally agree with that.
I think this meeting's going to be.
This one looks long, right?
So, what I'm trying to get at is schedule a break for 12 or schedule a break for 12:30 if we think we're going to go
I
through
think
that.
12:30 is too late.
12 would be fine, but if we're in the middle of an agenda item, just
Well, yeah.
as soon as you can, chair's discretion, but I do think if we're going to go 1, 2 o'clock, we need to do a 15, 30-minute lunch break.
Then we need to put on the agenda that the board may break.
Yeah, bring a sandwich or bring, doesn't mean we have to order out and feed everybody. We can just tell everybody, brown bag it. It's not like it's the first time we've ever had to do that.
I think giving people a heads up, though, that it's going to be a long meeting is important, because a lot of people have tight schedules, and they look at this agenda and see it's 11:30, and they make plans.
Mm-hmm.
They rely on the chair and, I guess, the executive committee and staff to follow kind of the timeline that they.
It's not fair to the staff. We have a lot of staff that are involved in these meetings
Right.
to support us. So to keep everybody just sitting there,
Okay.
it's not easy. And it's unnecessary.
Any, is there a motion to that effect?
I move that we break for lunch when we know our meetings are going to be long.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Fauch.
When our meetings are going to be long means going beyond, expected to go beyond 12:30.
Lunchtime.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. We were, I think where we departed was, we were talking a little bit about 30 minutes for the BRT project, and that maybe being a little optimistic. Do you want to change it to something else? Not hearing anything, let's work down through the rest and see where we end up. Regional Fair Collection.
Again, on, well, the item C, system redesign, Williamsport.
Yeah.
I'm
think
not
we
sure
need-
how much discussion we'll have. We have had relatively minimal, I would say, minimal public input on our proposed plan to go with the grid system in downtown St. Petersburg. The St. Pete City Council will, this is on their November 12th agenda to take action on this, hopefully, possibly, based on the public comment and any questions or comments that they have. And then this would be the PSA board's action to approve this as a pilot program to be implemented on February 14th. Cassandra?
We would probably have the biggest discussion be on what improvements would be made along with change in the routing. So in the fiscal year 16 budget, set aside $200,000 for improvements, and we make recommendations based on staff input, technical analysis, and the public engagement feedback that we've been getting from people in the workshop about where we would put that $200K worth of service.
Yeah, I could see we could have 20 minutes worth of public comment here.
I just wanted to add something real quick here, and I think this is more probably a comment maybe better suited for City of St. Pete folks than necessarily PSTA, but it's important to address. We have gotten some feedback here and there from homelessness advocates who are concerned about some of the language that's used in describing this project. It's not so much the first part about moving the buses, but it's the second part of what St. Pete does to bring new activities to the park. And there's been some language used, and maybe I've been guilty of using it myself, but language of like taking back the park, rejuvenating the park, reactivating the park, and words that really nobody really understands what they mean. But there's a concern that this is all about just trying to push homeless people out of Williams Park, and just want to be really clear and say that this is about making the park safe for everybody. In any big city, the person sitting over on the next bench to you could be a mama with a baby stroller, a guy with a briefcase, or someone harmless sleeping there for the afternoon. It's the bell curve of humanity that's living in a city. This is about providing better services to our PSTA riders and making the park safe for everybody. And I just think that type of messaging is really important. And again, maybe the people sitting here don't need to necessarily be reminded of that, but just so that you're aware of it, because there are some folks who have credibility and a lot of weight in the homelessness advocacy community and on HLN, and I just want us to be able to deal with this head-on responsibly and not have it be one of those things that nags us because we didn't deal with it right getting out of the gate.
That's a very timely reminder since we have HLB all afternoon today.
Oh, okay, HLB, I said HLN, but yeah, that would just be aware that there's some sensitivity.
Well, my suggestion is to continue putting 30 minutes on both of these, and then just, but still expect that someplace, something in here is going to take longer. Regional Fair Collection, we have 15 minutes.
It's probably too optimistic also. This is a significant project. Of course, you know it's a coordinated effort with HEART. It's an informational item on our agenda because PSDA, at least the way it's currently constructed, is partnering with HEART, but HEART is taking the lead on approving of the fair collection contract. They have selected a preferred contractor that they're taking before their committees this month and to their board for approval in December. And I think it's important for PSDA board to at least stay apprised of what's going on with an informational item. We could make this an action item for us to endorse it, but we're not really approving of the contract. There's an MOU that you will hopefully approve, at least contemplated, I would say. It hasn't been drafted yet.
Right, we haven't,
unfortunately.
yeah.
Is that for action in December?
Probably, hopefully January, there'll be an MOU coming back to you between PSDA and HART on how the project is managed. But again, that's not ready to go yet. But rather than, we could defer this to January, but I think there will be some, I would recommend that it would still do this in December, because this is when the project is really being kicked off.
I would concur with that. I think there's our two-step process with an informational item 1 month and then a action item the next month seems to work better for us. But any objection to that?
Well, and again, to Commissioner Long's earlier comment about messaging, how we message what we're doing to folks in Tallahassee especially. This is a major coordinated effort between PSDA and HART, and really and the other partners in the region. And this can be a real showcase opportunity for us to show how we are working in a regional effort. And I think if PSDA does not have any discussion or take, have some discussion about how we're going to coordinate, then we'll lose that opportunity. That's why I think it needs to be on the agenda, at minimum as an informational item.
Okay, so I've made it 30 minutes on mine. Reports and correspondence, the total reports and correspondence section is targeted for 5 minutes. I know that several people have asked about the reserves analysis, so I would put, or maybe move the reserve analysis up to an informational item and put 15 minutes on that.
We could. We're gonna make this presentation to the Finance Committee, and I mean, it's really your counsel is appreciated, but the appetite, even if I think we take a break of the board, has some limits. And for the last couple of months, we've had, I would think, some relatively positive feedback I've received about putting other information under this reports and correspondence, but not going through the presentations that have gone through a committee. We did that with the DART customer service questions, and then something this last week. I'm forgetting.
Well,
But,
we could let the Finance Committee decide, make a recommendation as to where to include it.
Totally do that.
Commissioner Welch was the one, I think, one of the ones that wanted to know about reserves, right?
Someone else asked at the last.
Commissioner Eggers.
Eggers is,
He's on finance, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
You could always move it to January. Is it time sensitive? I mean, informational.
It's informational.
Maybe do finance in December.
We can include it in the packet here, and then try to put it on the agenda for January.
I just think somebody's going to ask a question.
Yeah.
It's going to get discussed, I think, with the reserves, especially given the fact we're going in a little bit of a different direction than what was originally suggested. The bus replacement stuff, I think people are going to want to see that what we're doing is financially okay.
If you put it at the end of the finance committee meeting, we probably could catch it anyway
Yeah.
at 10:30.
For planning, for planning.
Okay.
All right, so I'd leave it under reports and correspondence for now. So I have up to 12:20. I think we need some additional time in there, so we should plan for a break at noon. So the agenda would, okay. Any other comments on the agenda? Post December agenda? The ongoing emerging technology updates?
Oh, I'm sorry. At some point, and this could wait till January, but we haven't had a legislative update to the general board. We could do that for January, but by January 27th, we should have a lot to report on.
Yeah. You'll just go to town.
Is there any other comments regarding?
What did you just say about technology?
I was moving on to the next agenda item,
Where was that?
which this is on the
It was
agenda
updated.
for
That's
the
what I was asking.
current meeting, and it's the one that was on the table when you came in.
Front page.
If you pull it from the
Oh.
web, it's not on there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
At least it wasn't.
And
But now all my notes are over here.
I would really like to get out of here by 12:20 for my council workshop, so
Did you come out today?
today, yeah.
So,
I'll hand it over to you if we're not there.
are we,
So let's go to the technology update discussion.
so at the last board meeting, Commissioner Eggers specifically asked that, and we discussed having this executive committee discuss how we might have the PSA board have a better understanding of emerging technologies in the transit industry. Commissioner Eggers specifically suggested having a committee, maybe committing a committee to keep the board apprised of new technologies. I'm not sure, I didn't discuss why. I know the county has a committee that oversees theirs and the constitutional officers' technology aspects that Commissioner Wilson chair, I think.
Yeah, PTS.
Why wouldn't this whole issue be part of planning?
That's what I think it should be.
Well,
I mean, I'm never about creating more committees. I mean, we have a lot of committees already. And planning is all about the future. So why don't we just make it an ongoing subject matter for planning, for updates?
well, and quite frankly, I think it has been a discussion of both committees from time to time. From my perspective, the comment was made, or there was a couple of board members that felt like they should have had more information about the bus technologies that we were discussing last week sooner, or they should have been more up to speed on the technical details, I guess, of electric buses versus hybrid versus other kinds of bus options. And we had provided a lot of technology, all that information, to the Finance Committee and included it in the board packet. But there was, I think that's where this discussion came out of, that is there a way, either within the existing committee structure of PSDA or some other way, that board members can stay apprised earlier or sooner on some of these things? Quite frankly, I'm not sure what else we can do. I mean, I know I had, during my one-on-one discussion with all 15 board members, discussions of electric versus hybrid versus all the different kinds of buses with the board members. We discussed it at length at the Finance Committee. I think there was some misinformation that led to some confusion in this topic, from the public and the Sierra Club folks. But any ideas or experiences you have in something that works in your cities would be great.
Yes, I interpreted that whole discussion in a different way. So maybe I'm the one that's out to lunch this I mean,
Are you getting hungry?
I am getting
Okay,
hungry.
just checking.
Yeah. But Commissioner Welch was with me when, or part of a panel that Congressman Jolly did on the future of transportation, et cetera, and I just found it fascinating, the information. I think you were there for part of it, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. But when I think about this issue, I'm thinking about, Brad, you serve on many national associations, and you're in leadership in quite a few of them. So it troubles me that this is our transit agency, and I have to go to other kinds of meetings, like at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, for example, or that workshop that Congressman Jolly did, to hear about what's going on in the world of the future for public transit. And they talked in that particular, symposium, I think he called it, about the future of driverless vehicles and how that will impact public transit options and stuff like that. And I had said to you once, I really wouldn't mind going off to one of these national conferences that are held where they have workshops on that kind of thing, and you hear about what all the new and greatest things are that are coming online, because we read about them in the paper, you hear about them when you're out and about, but we don't have a focus on that here at PSTA, and that's where I kind of got discouraged at that last board meeting, because it did seem that with the advent of the electric buses, the driverless cars, and on, that we are lacking in up-to-date information on what is the future, and how do we better make decisions about spending the limited resources that we have. So we're not, and I'm not picking on you, Debbie, but you did make that 5-year plan. We were still talking about buying diesel buses in it. And so, at what point do we transition away from that and start talking about, here are some of the newest things that are coming along that maybe we need to be planning for? That's what I got from it. Not about, I don't want to know all the nitty-gritty techie stuff. I just want to know what it is. Electric, if it's driverless, if it's electronic, if we're all going to be driven by GPS and Siri telling us
Series versus parallel.
Yeah, but I don't know, does that resonate with anybody else, what I'm trying to say? I'm not saying it right.
Let's see what other people have to say.
Yeah, that's fine.
Esther?
Cassandra said something to say as well.
I just have a question, because we do work on a number of research projects in-house, and we also talk to a number of consultants around the state that are doing all kinds of different things. How do you feel about us bringing technologies to you when we haven't thought about where we would have an application? Because I feel like when we bring you into new technology, we will have to have looked at it well enough within the context of the agency to say, how would this apply to us?
I'd just like to know that somebody's working on it.
Okay.
And that we don't have our heads in the sand on diesel buses, for example.
No, so here's an example. I've been talking to somebody who's working in Tallahassee on automated vehicles and the different technologies that are in automated vehicles. So what kind of applications that might have for us here. If I don't have that answer for you, when do you want to see that information about here are all of the features of automated vehicles, these are the ones we think we can use, these are the ones we think we can use in buses with the project that we think we ought to do with them. So we'd like to bring you our sustainability plan at some point. We're working on that, but what's the best way to get you this information?
Well,
There's
just what
so
you
much
just
of it.
said is very enlightening to me, I didn't know, am I the only one that didn't know that you were doing
No.
it?
No, it's the first time I've said that out loud.
Oh, okay.
I mean, outside of like just, the staff, meetings about it.
Well, the next agenda item is the sustainability goal, but, Vice Chair.
I think where Commissioner Eggers was coming from, he wanted a task force, not necessarily a permanent committee, is what I took. But he also sits on the finance board, and how we've done this in the past is the finance board is overseeing the buses, the purchases, because it's a purchase. It's a down low purchase. I think that's what needs to change. I think it has to become more about a policy. Yeah, they can review the purchase once the policy has been fulfilled. And so planning should be talking about the technology for the whatever types of vehicles we should be, what's the policy of where we want to go with the types of vehicles. And I think when he's sitting on finance, he is looking at the nuts and bolts of it, so that's where his head is. So no offense to him and his idea, I think I understand why he wanted it, but I think planning can be that task force. And I think the sustainability thing that we're getting ready to look at or talk about, well, as long as there's a statement in there that says we want to annually review, or we want to be on top of technologies, or this is, as long as we give that, the board gives that direction to staff, we're saying it's your priority to have your own internal task force to be looking at it.
Yeah.
And then come to us as it comes, so that we don't get caught off guard. I think that's probably the
Now you're
easiest
doing it,
way to do it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Just some random thoughts. I think FACT, Florida Association of Counties, for example, we get a lot of information there from different policy meetings, different committees. And I guess the problem with, it's not a problem, the difference with TSTA is we've got 15 members from everywhere, and the level of engagement for one member might be much different than the level for another member. So they're not going to go to these state meetings that Brad has, and there were some electives there the last time I went. But there's just such a variation in board engagement. So I guess as you were talking, I was thinking that if you really wanted to be engaged on top of those things, you would put your name in for one of the committees. And planning committee seems to be the right place for those kinds of, emerging technologies or whatever. So I think planning committee is the right place for it. But I also think if we could do the once a year at least off-site planning workshop that I talked about before, that could be the segment. Here's what's on the horizon for the next year, and staff could tell us here's, it might be some technology, and just give the whole board that one shot. Here's kind of what's on the horizon for the next year. So I think between those two, you could get to what Commissioner X was talking about. But for our board, they're so diverse that, it's just diverse. I think it works well. Some folks come, they only want to come to the meetings and be out by noon, and that's it. Others are at these planning committee executive meetings.
Is that a?
Yeah, no, I think that's between his suggestions and Julie, those right, that covers it all.
You want to make that as a motion?
Sure. Whatever.
Planning and an annual
And then
workshop.
Annual planning meeting off-site where we talk about all the.
Just make it a segment of the annual planning meeting,
Agenda.
but also designate new technologies as part of the planning committee.
Yeah.
And just a quick question, are we planning, Brad, to have a January or February workshop? I know we talked about it previously.
We talked about it at the board meeting.
Spring, if you can,
So you're chairing that, aren't you? Planning?
I won't be on.
she wanted to come off.
Oh, you did?
I wanted to give somebody else a chance. I've been on it since inception. Back
Sure.
in about giving somebody else a chance.
You're going off too, right?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I moved
think
around
so.
so many
And
different
Gerard's
places.
coming on, if I'm remembering.
Is that where I'm coming off to go on legislative?
Yes. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 I'm sorry, I didn't get a second.
Julie.
nice at the last meeting.
Oh,
Okay. You had suggested maybe, PSA has a sustainability policy, which we can refresh the board on exactly what that contains, but, you had come up with an idea, interesting, to come up with like a carbon neutral type goal or some kind of high level goal, for the organization to achieve, and then structure whatever policies we have under that.
Well, my thought was, yeah, I had thought about that previously, but then the discussion that Sierra Club brought forward on our decision about the bus purchase kind of brought it back again. It just seems like maybe a role for the board that really makes sense is in setting that type of policy and goal, and then it makes it more clear how the staff can make recommendations how to reach those goals, where the board doesn't have to be brought in such nitty-gritty details for every single tactical step or bus that we buy to reach those goals. I mean, it's not just about avoiding, nitty-gritty conversations, but it just seemed to me that, we were discussing tactics without discussing a strategy, and it's the board's role to discuss the big picture elements.
good point.
Also, I think it would be, I think it's a leadership issue as well. It's an opportunity for us to tell the public about what we're doing and our part. An important part of transportation policy when we do it right is that we reduce our environmental footprint. So I think in some ways that's a compelling message, it's a public health message, and maybe a better place for the board to position itself in terms of this conversation.
There was a, letter to the editor, I think, this morning.
I saw that.
It's kind of interesting that the people that did not vote for the hybrid benefits were in different places.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering about responding to that board. Because some of them wanted pure diesel.
Right.
Some of them wanted some or all to be electric. So the board
Some
was,
just wanted to have further discussion.
yeah. And, but I'm wondering about having the chair with the staff to come up with a response, even though the response is going to publish, but part of it would be using bus is environmentally responsible. First of all, having a transit option is our job within the environment, and then talk a little bit about just the trade-offs and different options.
If this was a letter from an organization like Sierra Club, I would respond to it, but it's from an individual who's clearly off message with the groups that he was working with. You can't characterize a vote on going from all diesel to all hybrid as hurting the environment. I just don't think we should respond to things that don't make sense.
Thank you. But any objection to this?
No,
Okay,
I
let's
agree.
move on. So back to our sustainability goals. We want to have staff try to draft a position or a draft and then take those on.
I think so. I think that's great. Because it really does, it's a policy, it's a position, and everybody knows what the position is. And then there's no question, the finance board folks are the nuts and bolts guys. And we have them there to always look at what the most reasonable, cost-effective way of running the operation. And we don't want to hurt that. But if they have a policy that they have to meet, then they will do so.
But
If
the
that
policy-
guides them.
But the policy has to include the financial.
Yes, yes.
In there.
That's one of the pillars of sustainability is economics.
Okay.
But we might also have staff look at what some of the programs are out there, so as we set goals and objectives, we can claim credit for reaching,
different levels of sustainability.
Kind of leads.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I don't think it includes a financial reward of any kind, it gives you a nice certificate, but,
That's important.
Well,
Oh, I agree.
anything else on this? Follow-up from the 10/28 board meeting.
So in the new packet that you have on page 15 is my summary of action items that the board gave me at the last meeting. Do you think there's something else that I missed?
I've got one, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You didn't miss it, but I want to add it.
Okay.
Ran into someone who was discussing our meeting, and they mentioned the CNG option, in that TECO had offered to build a plan for us, a CNG plan, and take that whole capital piece out of it. So when you're doing the electric bus service, can you do that for CNG as well?
Yeah.
And let us know, does TECO do that kind of infrastructure? And what does that mean for the economics of it? I was kind of surprised to hear that.
I thought.
I know you
yes
can't.
and yes.
I thought you had actually mentioned that at the board meeting.
Well, I missed it if you would.
I didn't hear that.
I didn't call it TECO, but yes, TECO, and we've had like 3 meetings, 3 different companies CNG companies have all come and met with us and proposed that.
Okay.
That it's not free, but they will finance the construction of it, they'll pay for it, they'll build it, and then we pay for it in an increased cost of buying gas, the natural gas from that company, from TECO. They'll charge us like 15 or 20 cents more per gallon on the gas that we buy.
Okay. Well, I want to understand that as well as we're comparing the 3. It doesn't sound like that's going to be the priority of Sierra and others because of the fracking connection, but I'd still like to understand the economics of it.
Yeah. And at least my understanding, and Debbie, you can confirm, but TECO didn't give us a firm offer. They were here and they, as I told the board, they had expressed some concerns about our property here and the ability to locate a CNG site that could be accessed by the general public as well as the buses. And so that's what I said to the board, and that's what
Okay.
they said needs further review.
But there's some other CNG projects in the city of Clearwater,
We have one on Bridge Place.
and then Hart is doing a bunch of CNG, so it's in the city of St. Pete as well. So I'm
Hart's
just
right.
wondering if that, as we're reviewing everything, we know how that might work as well.
Okay, so this is the request to have added to your list.
Yeah, so add it to the Welch bullet down there.
And I replying to Mr. Lynch.
Okay.
I think it would probably be included in this, but I just want to, and I'm sure you remember it, but at the meeting, Commissioner Long had brought up, partnership with Duke. And I had added to her comment about the partnership with Duke was partnership with municipalities. And just hope that we're going to include all of that in Commissioner Welch's proposal.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it says,
CNG?
no, detailed plans for electric bus service to be presented to planning. Bus purchase options on the follow-up item.
Oh.
And his bullet there, under Welch, says detailed plans for electric bus service to be presented to planning. And I was just hoping you would include the concept or what it could look like. You might not have all the answers of the partnership with Duke and municipalities, because municipalities, some want to put in electric charging stations, and if they can, even if it's just one that they're hooking up with you, they might be willing to pay a portion of the cost, or give you free right-of-way, or, and I think that's really important.
Anything else from that meeting? That list? I had thought of a suggestion kind of going forward for an agenda, a regular agenda item on the executive committee, which would be a last board meeting, pluses and delegates. Something we used to do at Honeywell, or something just where you looked at what went really well last meeting, what would you change moving forward. We generally do that. We talk about lunch, talk about where the attorney should sit, but just have that as a standard on the and it's really up to the future chair, but I'll throw that out as a suggestion. And on the bottom, the number 5, 44 for quorum. Okay, we've deferred it on phase 3. Okay. Anything else?
About the pluses and delta, I've worked with groups that use that before also, and I found it to be very helpful. The plus side to that would be if we have like a more maybe informal discussion on debriefing after a meeting, that might be a good way to get issues out on the table. And it maybe, I mean, sometimes I feel with some of these actions that we took today, like regarding rules and regulations and so forth, I kind of feel like the general who's always fighting the last battle. And so we're proposing things to fix what happened in the last couple of meetings, but it may not be what comes up again. But if we could just debrief it at an executive committee level, maybe we don't feel the need to have to like change so many regulations or policies.
So we can do that.
And I don't mean that as a criticism, I just mean that, you know, there's different ways to address it, but I think debriefing is a real important thing to do.
That was really what I was intending. But the question is, to do it at the next executive committee meeting, or did you imply that we should do that immediately after the meeting?
No, if you want to do it going forward.
Any other follow-up items? The number 2 that Commissioner Long brought up in the minutes of having a deputy.
Oh, yeah, where are we with that, Brad?
So again, what the executive committee discussed and voted on to require PSK to develop succession planning for our organization. I have implemented that throughout the organization and put that as a requirement in each of my directors' performance goals for the next year to develop succession planning for their organizations as well. And I will have it in mind to the PSA board. The our HR department is required to develop sort of a standardized method for ensuring that each department director completes this activity. And then ultimately, I would think I would present that a collective summary of all of those plans to the PSDA board to describe how we as an organization that we are sustaining, that we have a succession plan that covers from the top down how we are working. There was some discussion about whether or not PSDA needs a assistant CEO, and at least I'm not prepared to make that recommendation or change at this time. I think we have a strong team of chiefs, and with the direction that they're being given with the succession planning aspect, I think that's where we are today. I mean, they are taking on more responsibilities moving forward, and so I've delegated some of those responsibilities. Not to say that designated number 2 is not going to happen, but at least it's not probably immediate. haven't made any immediate designations of that.
And what is the reason for that, if you don't mind me asking?
It's because I think we have a lot of, a lot of different projects that have an immediate urgency, and I think I rely on all of my chiefs to cover those things. Next year's budget is a different thing. We maybe by next year's budget, we can look at how I can cover it up.
I just have a council workshop.
Yeah. We'll be fine, don't worry, we'll carry on.
Safe travels, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dan.
So, Madam Chair. So you're saying you do not have a number two now?
That's right. I have.
That's the problem
I
for
think
me.
it's big problem.
If God forbid you get hit by a bus, who is in charge of the organization?
Beer truck, please.
Beer truck, whatever. And that's been my issue all along. You know, if you're not available, we have to know who the number two is.
Right, and we have clarified, or we have,
So who is it today?
anytime that I am out or out of the office or not available, an acting CEO is always put in place, and I have enacted a
That's not
situation where
that's
I
not the
inform the
circumstance
board.
I'm talking about. If something happens that's not expected, you walk out the door and faint, and you're in not all children's, why would you in all children's? Bayfront, who's the number two at that point? Who does the chair turn to? Who does the board member turn to
If
at
I
that
am
point?
living, if I am breathing, I will designate
Brad,
the
you
CEO.
are not listening. You're not listening. This is a large organization. It's a big agency. A lot of people care about it. You are talking to someone who is, just, there could never, ever be an accident. There could never, ever be something unforeseen, and those things happen all the time. What we as a board are charged with doing is ensuring the ongoing operations of this agency, and you are leaving a big vacuum there. Can you not see that?
I hear what you're saying.
No.
I don't think there is a vacuum.
I
With all due
disagree
respect.
with you. When you're not here, or you're going away, and you designate something, it's a revolving door. One day it's Cassandra, the next day it's Debbie, the next day it's somebody else. I mean, that's not what we're talking about here. At least that's what,
If I can just go back to our minutes, which is what you were looking, is what you were looking at. Now, of course, the minutes don't say every word that was stated, but when you read it, the first thing we talk about is a strong number two. And as we get going, it doesn't say every statement that was made, but I remember this discussion. We were looking for the wordsmithing of what's a strong number two, and that's when we said succession plan. It went from, and the only succession planning for Mr. Miller is a strong number two. That's succession planning. You're not going to say, I'm going to move up my finance director, because you don't know who your finance director is going to be. You're going to have a number two. And that was motioned and passed unanimously. So the direction has been given, according to these
Yeah, but
minutes.
I am
in
working on
mind.
a succession plan for the CEO of PSTA. That does not mean that I have a number two identified today. I
No,
don't.
but
But
you-
I'm working.
But the way you approached it was as if, well, you're not recommending it at this time. Are you saying you're going to come back with something? That's all she was looking for. She meaning Commissioner Long. I don't mean to call her she. Well, my husband gets mad at my son for calling me she. He sees it as a term of disrespect. I've never saw it that way, but. So my apologies. Commissioner Long is just asking for an update as to where you are with that, with what we voted on, and we did vote on it.
That's right. And I acknowledge that I owe you a succession plan from the CEO and every other key leader of the organization on how that would be replaced in a unforeseen event, and that can be communicated effectively so that the board knows who is in charge, who they go to. That's right.
I see this in a couple different ways. I see a difference between having like an incident command protocol where if you did vanish, who immediately steps in and takes control, GSTA, and then succession planning is a little bit different. And I'm not saying it, I agree it's very important to have, but my question is how we would introduce that, because I wouldn't want to disrupt the management of GSTA or upper director levels, because it may be introducing a dynamic that wasn't there before, or even getting into a question of job descriptions, expectations, and if all of a sudden now you're picking a number 2 in the band. I don't know. I mean, I think it's important to have a succession plan, but I am concerned about what that could communicate if it's not done really carefully, and how that's communicated. I mean, the board could go to a national search as well. So, I just
Well, I think as Mr. Woodard has a number of assistant folks, I don't know what his succession plan is, but there would be somebody that would be there as interim until the board did what they were going to do. Mr. Woodard left. It's not an automatic that person would, but you have somebody that can seamlessly step into the position while you're figuring everything out. And I think that's what we were looking for when this vote was taken. So I think it's important to get an update on that. So maybe at the next executive committee, you could give us we caught you off guard on that question. So maybe at the next executive committee, you could give us an update.
Well, and it's really business continuity, if you want to view it that way. I just really caught him off guard. I've been talking to Brad about this for more than a year.
And
It concerns
Well, we all have,
for the
but-
organization. Because we're going to get the call.
Yeah.
Who's in charge now? Well, I don't know. I don't want to be in that position.
Okay. Any other items on the follow-up? All right, January board meeting agenda, I think we have our future subjects, we've kind of moved.
Yeah, we've already sort of added some of that.
We moved 2 items, I think, didn't we? We moved the board rules and board rules and regulations.
And a reserve.
And the reserve analysis to January. Anything else anybody wanted to add to that besides the normal business? Okay. Any other business, Commissioner Welch?
No, ma'am.
Councilwoman Lee? I don't have any either, so we are adjourned. Okay.
Enjoy your HLB before y'all meet her.
At the hospital.
Are you close? That was discussed at your council meeting, wasn't it? About the concern about Williams Park.
Yeah, well, maybe talk about it.
Yeah, that's,
I haven't had a chance to, I don't think I've had a chance to really bring it up with,
I thought Councilmember Foster mentioned